Today I want to talk about one of my bugbears and things that really irritate me about our South African society and the public conversation that we have about politics and about the future of our country. And that is the role that the media, and specifically the mainstream media, owned by white monopoly capitalists, play in this narrative. For many years, we've seen how the main publications in South Africa, whether it was the old Rand Daily Mail, the old Afrikaans papers, the Transvaal, the Rapport, all of those papers influenced the narrative in order to suit the interests of the white monopoly capitalist owners of our economy. In recent years, we've seen particular examples where truth had absolutely nothing anymore of a foundation for the way in which these newspapers and media outlets reported. A most recent example was the treatment of President Jacob Zuma during the 9 years of his presidency, but for a period of more than 22 years, where he was the subject of vociferous personal attacks. And as his commitment to radical economic transformation came out more and more, especially towards the end of his 9-year period as president, when he openly supported the expropriation of land without compensation and introduced free education, especially tertiary education for the poorest of the poor, these attacks increased because the white monopoly capitalists started to fear that President Zuma could indeed unsettle them and loosen their grip on the South African economy. Just a couple of years ago, the Sunday Times published an article blazing on its front pages that President Zuma had been given a mansion, they said, by the Gupta family in Dubai. A few weeks later, the same photo of the same house was again published, again with blazing headlines, this time claiming that it was now the house of President Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma. The fact that the one story didn't touch base with the other, the fact that there were direct contradictions didn't matter, as long as they could run a propaganda campaign in order to undermine him, and especially to undermine and destroy the ANC economic policy program of radical economic transformation. As these stories were running, we could see them being picked up by one after the other of the other media houses also in the control of white monopoly capitalism. In the Sunday Times, it then went to the City Press, then to the Mail and Guardian, then to Business Day, then to the Financial Times. I can go on and on. Now, this is the kind of journalism that I would call checkbook, sell-out journalism. Journalists who are hacks, who are not interested in truly reporting facts, in truly reporting objective stories, but are being given their storyline by their white monopoly capitalist masters, and they simply execute. Another example has been a meeting that took place between President Zuma and the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Ace Magashule, at the Maharani Hotel in Durban. This was an open meeting in a public place, a hotel, between two senior comrades who wanted to meet and exchange their friendship and views. Yet the Sunday Times insisted on calling it a COVID meeting, and that it was a meeting where planning took place to undermine and perhaps unseat President Cyril Ramaphosa. Despite all the facts that were presented to them, they continued to carry the story. And once again, all their media friends on the other media platforms of white monopoly capitalism echoed the story and strengthened it. There was nothing about fact. It was all about Stratcom, fake news, propaganda. Now, why am I talking about all of this morning? Because yesterday I received, out of the blue, a WhatsApp message from an investigating, or a so-called investigating journalist with the name of Susan Comrie of the Amabungani Center for Investigative Journalism. Yeah, what a misnomer. Center for Investigative Journalism. Wow. But anyhow, I received this WhatsApp message from Ms. Comrie, claiming that she has some information, as if it was a big revelation, about a small WhatsApp group called the Twitter Storm WhatsApp group, with only 21 members, of which I am a member too. She claimed that this small, insignificant Twitter Storm WhatsApp group was part of a big conspiracy planning to promote certain political messages and to create factional politics within the African National Congress. She then proceeded to quote to me one of the messages that I tweeted some time ago on that WhatsApp group about the then spokesperson of the African National Congress, Comrade Jackson Mthembu, where I criticized Comrade Jackson for having swallowed hook, line and sinker the propaganda of the Sunday Times about that meeting that they tried to infuse with all kinds of covert activities between President Zuma and Comrade Ace Magashule at the Maharani Hotel in Durban. Then from there, she extrapolated a whole story that we were part of a campaign to promote President Zuma, that we're part of a campaign to promote particular political ideals that would undermine the unity in the African National Congress and target President Cyril Ramaphosa. Wow. Yes, of course. I am a member of that small WhatsApp group called Twitter Storm. Yes, of course, we share views there. Of course, I give expression to my commitment to radical economic transformation, as I've done all over in many media groups and from many public platforms, in interviews on television and on radio, in speeches in front of the Pietermaritzburg High Court when President Zuma appeared on his numerous occasions that he has to go to court because of the political persecution that he's being subjected to. I responded to Ms. Comrie. I trashed the attempt that she was trying to make to place me in a position of conspiracy. And I stated very clearly that what I've done and what I've said is a matter of public knowledge. In fact, that I belong to many other WhatsApp groups, some of them far bigger than this small Twitter Storm WhatsApp group. I pointed out to her that it's pathetic that they use moles to infiltrate these little WhatsApp groups and to try and generate stories which suit their political agenda with the intention and aim to attack radical economic transformation. And I emphasized that no matter what they try to do, no matter how many times they try to call our commitment within the African National Congress to radical economic transformation factional, that radical economic transformation is indeed the mainstream economic policy program of the ANC. And it found expression in the resolutions, the pro-radical economic transformation resolutions that the African National Congress adopted at our 54th National Conference, which took place in 1917 at Nasrec. And I told her that I'm not apologetic about having criticized Comrade Jackson Mthembu for having allowed himself to be led by the nose by the rubbish that the Sunday Times published. In fact, I've told Comrade Jackson that to his face. And I told him that I'm deeply disappointed that he allowed himself to be used in this manner. Many years ago, when I was the national spokesperson for the African National Congress, I was the one who recruited Comrade Jackson Mthembu to take up the position as spokesperson of the African National Congress in the province of Mpumalanga. And I trained him. I'm sad to say that clearly my training was unsuccessful and I failed, because I truly expected some more discernment from Comrade Jackson, and not to allow himself, either by design or by ignorance, to be used in this way for the propaganda of the white monopoly capitalist forces in this country. Now it's time for me to conclude, because I can go on and on about my irritation about how the media in this country, and especially the mainstream media financed by white monopoly capitalist interests, is being used to try and manipulate the political discourse, to misinform the majority of people, and to destroy the objective that the African National Congress always had and should always have, and that is to bring full liberation to the people of South Africa, which must also include full economic liberation, so that the majority of black poor, and especially the African people, can truly scale the commanding heights of our economy. I will continue to challenge these mainstream white monopoly capitalist financed institutions, together with many of my fellow comrades. I have no doubt that their propaganda is becoming increasingly insufficient to stave away the wave of support, the wave of pushing for true economic liberation in South Africa. They will fail, because what they do is based on lies, and on the repeating of lies ad nauseum. More and more publications such as the Sunday Times stand exposed for the propaganda rags that they are. And more I hear our people saying, we are fed up. We won't read these newspapers anymore. We don't believe these stories. We have seen right through them. So my hope and my true wish is that ultimately in South Africa, we will be able to see through the fog and the deceit that is so often presented to us by these mainstream media outlets, and that we will be able to continue to understand what is in the best interest of ourselves, the best interest of ourselves in demanding that economic liberation and the control of our economy has to be part of our full liberation. Thank you.